The night he handed me the bill was also the night I realized I had been married to a stranger. I remember staring down at the white slip of paper, $15,072.83, neatly placed on a linen tablecloth like it belonged there. The wine glasses still shimmered with candlelight, and the guests at Marjorie's birthday dinner hadn't even finished dessert. Logan leaned in, gave me a faint smile, and said softly, "You've got this, right?" And I paid, with a hand that didn't shake, a card I knew was already bleeding, and a heart that had been bleeding long before the bill ever arrived. But it didn't start like this. I met Logan 3 years earlier at a little cafe in the Alberta Arts District. I had just been laid off from a non-profit job that barely paid my bills, but fed my soul. I was drinking the cheapest coffee on the menu, trying to make peace with failure, when he walked in, tall, relaxed, with a crooked smile and a leather satchel that made him look like a wandering poet. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, gesturing toward the chair across from me. I shook my head. "Only if you're allergic to bitter coffee and existential dread," I replied without thinking. He laughed. God, that laugh. We talked for hours about nothing and everything. About why pineapple belonged on pizza. About TV shows that didn't deserve their finales. About second chances and first heartbreaks. By the time the cafe closed, I knew two things. He was allergic to cats and I was in trouble. We began dating the way most people don't anymore, with time, conversation, and shared silences. He remembered little things. My dislike for cilantro, the exact shade of lipstick I wore when nervous, the way I curled my fingers when I was about to cry but didn't want it. I told myself, this is safety. A year later, he proposed, not with grand gestures, but in the middle of folding laundry. "Marry me," he said, holding up one of my socks. I laughed. "Only if you promise to never bleach my clothes again." And we were married that fall in a small ceremony beneath a row of trembling maple trees, the kind that made you believe the world could still be gentle. We moved into a cozy 2-bedroom rental in southeast Portland, with mismatched furniture and too many bookshelves. Our life wasn't perfect, but it was real, or so I thought. Looking back now, I realized the cracks weren't sudden. They had always been there. Hairline fractures masked by laughter, sarcasm, and scrambled eggs on Sunday mornings. But that was the beginning before the silence, before his mother, before the prenup, before the scent of another woman on his shirt. The first time I met Marjorie Prescott, Logan's mother, she offered me a cookie and a smile so tight it could have snapped her jaw. "Naomi, dear," she said. "So nice to finally meet the woman my son just can't stop talking about." Her voice was honeyed. Her pearls gleamed, and her eyes searched me like she was scanning for counterfeit. Logan stood beside me, hand warm against my back, oblivious to the quiet battle already unfolding across his mother's kitchen counter. Marjorie made no effort to hide her disapproval. Everything I said was met with a nod too slow, too practiced. Every silence between us was filled with carefully veiled questions about my future goals, my understanding of financial independence, and whether I believed in traditional values. It wasn't curiosity. It was a test. And I knew I was failing. At dinner, she raised her wine glass and said, "To Logan's happiness and to the importance of safeguarding it." Then came the suggestion, so casual it cut like glass. "Of course, you'll be signing a prenup. It's just standard these days, nothing personal." Logan flinched. I froze. Nothing personal. Of course it was personal. Later that night, in her tiny kitchen, I asked Logan, "Did you know she'd bring that up?" He looked sheepish. "Yeah, I mean, she mentioned it. It's just a precaution, Naomi. She doesn't know you like I do." I stared at him. "Then tell her I'm not after her money." "It's not about that," he said. "It's just easier this way." I swallowed the insult, even though it burned going down. I didn't sleep that night. I thought about how quickly love turned into negotiation, how security meant contracts, how trust had to be notarized. And by morning I had an answer. "I'll sign it," I told them both, standing in Marjorie's spotless living room a week later. But I want one clause of my own. Marjorie raised an eyebrow. If either of us cheats, I said, slowly looking straight at Logan, the cheater pays the other $300,000. No excuses. No loopholes. The room went quiet. Logan blinked, like I'd slapped him. Babe, I'd never. My ex said the same thing, I interrupted, before I found lipstick on his collar that wasn't mine. Marjorie's lips thinned into a line. Well, she said, standing up, I suppose fairness goes both ways. I nodded. Exactly. The papers were signed the next day. Logan looked relieved. Marjorie looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. And me? I walked out of that lawyer's office feeling oddly calm, like I had just placed a loaded gun on the table and dared the future to touch it. Marjorie didn't wait long after the wedding to insert herself into our lives. It started with the weekly calls, just checking in. She'd chirp. Then the surprise visits with her homemade lasagna and judgmental glances. At first, I played along, smiled politely, laughed at her subtle jabs about my decorating style or how I clearly didn't learn to iron growing up. Logan always said the same thing after she left. She means well. But the truth was she didn't. The real pressure began 6 months in. Over brunch one Sunday, Marjorie set her fork down with an exaggerated sigh. Naomi, dear, she said sweetly, I was just thinking, it's been a while now, hasn't it? Are you two planning to start a family anytime soon? Logan coughed into his coffee. I blinked. We've talked about it, I said carefully. It's not something you rush into. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Well, time isn't exactly slowing down for anyone, you know. The message was clear. You're wasting his time. You're wasting my time. I forced a laugh, pretending not to hear the clock ticking in her voice. At home, I brought it up to Logan. You could have said something, I told him. He shrugged. She just wants to be a grandmother. It's not a crime. No, but it's not her uterus either, I snapped. His silence was louder than any argument. As the months passed, Marjorie's visits became regular and razor-sharp. She began inspecting the house like she was conducting an open house for buyers. You call this clean? She scoffed, wiping a finger along a perfectly fine countertop. Kevin's shirts were never wrinkled when I did laundry. Then came the remarks about my looks. That's what you're wearing today. You should try a little makeup, Naomi. Logan works hard. You could at least make an effort. I tried to stand my ground. I dress for myself, not your son. But it was like throwing stones at fog. Marjorie wasn't listening. She had already made up her mind. The worst part wasn't her cruelty, it was Logan's apathy. After each visit, I'd ask, why don't you say anything? Why do you let her speak to me like that? He'd run a hand through his hair and mutter, she's old school. She'll come around. But she didn't, and I was running out of patience. Then one Thursday afternoon, the dam cracked. She showed up uninvited, criticized my cooking in front of Logan, and made yet another jab about my useless womb. I turned to Logan, eyes pleading, desperate for him to say something, but he just stared at his plate, fork scraping quietly, as if the lasagna were more important than me. That was the moment I realized. I wasn't married to a man, I was married to a son. After that Thursday, something in me broke, but something in Logan changed too. At first, it was subtle. He stopped lingering after dinner, stopped making jokes about how I burned toast with personality. He'd say he was tired, or that work was crazy. But the truth was, Logan had started to disappear, even when he was standing right in front of me. The phone was the first clue. He used to leave it lying around, screen up, forgotten on the couch or the bathroom counter. Now it was always face down, locked, guarded. And every time a text came in, usually from someone named Jacob Work, he'd step out to answer it, voice hushed, door half closed. I tried not to jump to conclusions. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself Jacob was real. But my stomach, it knew. My body knew before my brain would admit it. One night, I asked directly, trying to keep my tone light. So, who's Jacob? I feel like I've heard his name more than mine lately. Logan's reaction was instant, a flinch, so small most people wouldn't notice. But I did. Just a new guy at the firm, he said too quickly. Total mess. Keeps calling with questions. He didn't meet my eyes. I smiled and nodded. Must be exhausting. That night he slept soundly. I didn't sleep at all. A few days later, he started dressing differently. Gone were the faded tees and old jeans. Now it was crisp button-downs, polished shoes, a new scent, something expensive and musky, like a department store cologne counter. I asked, half joking, "Job interview I don't know about?" He smirked, "Just updating the wardrobe. No harm in looking good, right?" I forced a laugh. "Sure, no harm at all." But it was harm. Not in the clothes, not in the cologne, but in the distance. The kind you can't explain to anyone because it isn't loud. It's quiet, cold, strategic. Eventually I broke. One sleepless night, I reached out to a friend of mine, Eva, a former colleague who now worked in private security. "I need someone discreet," I told her. "I'm not ready for drama. I just need the truth." She didn't ask questions. 2 days later, a manila envelope was dropped in my mailbox. I stared at it for hours before opening it. Inside were photos. Dozens. Logan at a wine bar with a woman I'd never seen. Logan with his hand on her back. Logan leaning in to kiss her neck. Logan smiling in a way he hadn't smiled at me in months. And then the recording. His voice low and intimate. "I'm going to leave Naomi soon," he said, "after the birthday thing. She's got savings we can use for the move." My hand shook. My vision blurred. But I didn't cry. Not right then. Not yet. Because suddenly the game had changed. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror for a long time. Not to check my makeup, not to adjust my hair. I was studying the face of someone who just lost her marriage and found her resolve. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I needed to see how deep this betrayal ran and just how far they were willing to go. So I gave them bait. That afternoon, as Logan scrolled through his phone like I wasn't even there, I casually dropped a line over dinner. "So, you remember Aunt Esther from New Hampshire?" He grunted, vaguely. "The one with the birds." I nodded. "She passed last month. Apparently I'm in her will." I didn't even blink as I lied. My cousin said it could be 6 figures, maybe more. For the first time in days, Logan looked up. Really looked at me. "Seriously?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, stirring my soup like it was nothing. Crazy, right? I didn't even know she liked me that much. He leaned back, suddenly interested. "Wow, that could change things for us." I smiled faintly. "Mm-hmm." The next day, Marjorie called. "No, hi, Naomi." "No, how are you?" "Just, Logan mentioned your inheritance. I assume you'll do the right thing and invest it wisely for the family's future." Her voice oozed entitlement, like the money was already in her pocket. I bit my tongue. "Of course, Marjorie," I said sweetly. "Family comes first." That night, Logan brought me tea in bed. Tea. The man who forgot my birthday 2 months ago now wanted to take care of me. He even kissed my forehead and whispered, "I've been distant. I'm sorry." I almost laughed, but I just nodded and whispered back, "I know. I'm just glad we're getting close again." Let them think they were winning. Let them smile while they sharpen their knives. Because they didn't realize I was already holding mine behind my back. Marjorie's 70th birthday was approaching, and with it came the perfect opportunity. She called me one afternoon, voice syrupy and smug. "Naomi, dear, I assume Logan told you about the dinner. It's tradition, of course. Just family. Something tasteful." I could hear the expectation thick in her tone. Something tasteful meant expensive. "Of course," I replied sweetly. "I was actually thinking of planning something special, just for you." She didn't hide her delight. "Oh, Naomi, how thoughtful. I knew you'd come around." She hung up quickly, probably already imagining the guest list and the wine pairings. What she didn't know was that I had already made the reservation. The Juniper Room, Portland's most luxurious rooftop restaurant overlooking the skyline. Private dining, custom menu, live cello quartet. I booked it under my name, paid the deposit using my own savings, and arranged everything down to the floral centerpieces. I made sure it would be unforgettable. Logan floated through the week like a man basking in the warmth of a trap he didn't know he'd walked into. He kissed my cheek in the mornings, offered to run errands, even bought me a scarf I mentioned once in passing. "Everything ready for the dinner?" he asked 2 nights before. I nodded. "Oh, absolutely. You'll love it." The night of the party arrived with the kind of manufactured elegance Marjorie adored. She swept into the dining room like a queen, all fur and perfume, taking in the glittering chandeliers and the attentive waitstaff with open satisfaction. "Naomi," she said, touching my arm, "you've outdone yourself." I smiled. It's what family does for someone so beloved. Dinner was a curated performance. Every smile rehearsed, every toast strategically made. I played the part well. The perfect hostess, the devoted daughter-in-law, the woman who knew nothing. Until dessert, just as the creme brulee was served, a waiter leaned in quietly. "Ma'am, the bill's ready. Shall I bring it to your table?" I nodded. "Yes, right here." Logan was raising his glass to say something when I interrupted. "Everyone," I said, standing. "I just want to say how much this night has meant. Celebrating Marjorie, being together, really reminded me what matters most." I took the leather folder from the waiter and opened it slowly. "Logan," I said, handing him the bill, "since this night was all about family, I thought you'd appreciate handling the family finances." He blinked. "Wait, what?" 15,000, I said softly. "Give or take a few bucks." Marjorie's mouth dropped open. "I thought you were paying," she hissed. I turned to her, calm and steady. "You said I was part of the family until I wasn't, so I figured this one's on you." Logan reached for his wallet, then stopped. His card declined. Mine? Already removed from the shared account. The waiter waited. Guests stared, and as panic crept across their faces, I slowly took off my wedding ring, placed it gently on the dessert plate in front of Logan, and whispered, "Happy birthday, Marjorie." Then I turned and walked out just as the cello played its final note. I didn't look back as I stepped into the cold Portland night, but I heard it, the tension breaking behind me like glass. Raised voices, the clatter of a chair, one of the servers chasing after Logan, asking politely, then firmly for payment. I kept walking, past the valet, past the glowing city skyline. The only thing in my pocket was my phone, already on airplane mode. By the time I got back to the apartment, his apartment, I already knew what my next move was. There would be no messy confrontation, no screaming, no dramatic breakdown, just silence, precision, and control. I packed my things quickly, only what was mine. I didn't even bother taking the throw blanket we'd bought together or the stack of books I'd never finished reading. Every item I left behind felt like a piece of pain I refused to carry into my next chapter. An hour later, my phone started buzzing. The first call was from Marjorie. I ignored it. Then Logan. Then the restaurant. Then silence. I was halfway through changing the password to our joint savings account when the final call came in. Marjorie again. This time I answered. "Naomi," she snapped, not even waiting for a greeting. "The payment didn't go through. The restaurant staff is threatening to call the police. This is your mess. Fix it." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I just let the silence stretch for a few delicious seconds before replying. "I thought I wasn't part of the family anymore, remember? This sounds like a family problem." Then I hung up. It was beautiful. The next morning, I returned one last time. Not to apologize, not to explain, just to deliver what I'd been holding on to the documents. Logan opened the door, his expression a mix of panic and resentment. Marjorie stood behind him in a silk robe, still wearing last night's makeup, eyes red from crying or screaming, or both. "You've got some nerve showing up here," Logan spat. "After what you did." I cut him off by placing a thick envelope on the kitchen island. "Divorce papers. Signed. Filed. And before you open your mouth again," I slid out the photos. The ones of him and the other woman. The one where his hand was down the back of her dress. The recording came next, on a small flash drive, marked neatly, Jacob Work. Marjorie moved forward, face pale. "Naomi, sweetheart, we can talk about this." I met her eyes. "Oh, I'm sure you'd love to talk. Especially about the prenup clause you both forgot about." Logan's face drained of color. "No." I nodded. "Yes. You cheat. You pay." Marjorie's composure cracked. "You wouldn't dare," I smiled. "I already did." Logan reached out, like he could change the ending with a touch. "Please, Naomi, we can work through this. We made mistakes. Mistakes." I laughed, low and cold. "You drained my savings, fed me lies, paraded me around like a wallet in heels. You didn't make mistakes. You made plans. And now so did I." He sank into a chair, head in hands. Marjorie screamed something about lawyers. I didn't listen. I handed them the final piece, my invoice. $300,000. As agreed. They didn't speak another word as I walked out the front door for the last time, the check in my purse. It wasn't revenge. It was reimbursement, and I wasn't leaving empty-handed. I was leaving free. The check cleared 2 days later. I moved into a small craftsman-style duplex on the east side of Portland. Nothing fancy, but quiet, warm, and mine. There were rose bushes out front, a creaky old porch swing, and a little patch of dirt behind the kitchen where I planted tomatoes, basil, and marigolds. The first night I slept there, I left the windows open and listened to the wind without needing to brace for voices or footsteps or lies. People say healing is a journey. For me, it was silence. Real silence. Not the kind that hides pain, but the kind that makes room for breath. I bought a yoga mat, joined a community garden, learned to make sourdough badly, and laughed at myself when it came out like a brick. For the first time in years, no one was watching me. No one was measuring my worth in chores or children or compliance. I was just Naomi again. I got a job as a project coordinator at a small nonprofit focused on food equity. Ironic, maybe, for someone who had spent the last 3 years serving tea to people who wouldn't pass me the salt without comment. My boss was kind. My coworkers were strange in the best way. And on my second week, someone left a plan on my desk with a sticky note that read, "You're exactly where you're supposed to be." I kept it. It's still there. Marjorie tried to contact me twice. Once through Logan's lawyer, demanding I return a set of silverware. I didn't. The second time was a voicemail. "I hope you're proud of yourself. You humiliated this family." I deleted it before she could finish the sentence. And Logan? Well, I hadn't heard from him directly. But Portland is small and gossip has long legs. One morning at the local cafe, while I was waiting for my latte, I heard my name. "Naomi." I turned and saw a woman from our old neighborhood. Her expression danced between curiosity and glee. "Oh my God, I have to tell you, you won't believe what's going on with Logan and that new girl." I sipped my drink and raised an eyebrow. "Still alive, is he?" She chuckled. "Barely. Word is Marjorie hates the new one. They fight constantly. Screaming matches. Someone even called the cops last week." I smiled, slow and real. "Sounds exhausting." As I left the cafe, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt light, like whatever weight had been stapled to my ribs for the last 3 years had finally dissolved into the air around me. They were still living in chaos, and I was finally living in peace. I used to think revenge meant fireworks, something explosive, loud, undeniable. But now I know sometimes the most powerful revenge is quiet. It's waking up in the morning with no dread in your chest. It's sipping coffee without wondering who's lying to you. It's looking around your small, imperfect life and thinking, this is mine. There were nights, after it all ended, when I'd sit on the porch swing with a blanket around my shoulders and just watch the sky fade into indigo. I'd listen to the wind rustling through the trees and think about how easily I could have stayed. How many women do? Stay for the image, for the fear, for the false comfort of familiarity. But I didn't. I stepped into the storm and somehow I found the sun again. My neighbors knew little about my past, and I kept it that way. To them, I was the woman who always brought too much lemon cake to community events, who killed her succulents by accident, who once tried paddleboarding and fell in twice. I liked that version of me. I chose her. One Saturday morning, while I was pulling weeds from my tiny garden, a little girl from down the block road passed on her pink bike. She stopped at the edge of my yard and shouted, "Miss Naomi, your tomatoes are winning." I laughed. Let's hope the squirrels don't hear that. She grinned and pedaled away. It hit me then. This was the life they said I'd never have without them. Marjorie had once warned me, "You'll be nothing without this family." Logan had muttered during one argument, "Who would even take you back if I left?" But here I was, taken back by myself. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the version of me that stayed quiet too long. The woman who made excuses for being treated like an afterthought. I don't hate her. She survived. She endured. And she gathered the strength I now use every single day. If anything, I thank her, because without her, I wouldn't have known what it felt like to choose myself with no apology. A few months after the divorce was finalized, I received an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name in Logan's handwriting. Inside, a short letter, sloppy rushed. It said, "I messed up. I miss you. I was stupid. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a long while. Then I folded it carefully and dropped it into the compost bin with the eggshells and wilted lettuce. I figured maybe, finally, he'd be useful for something, feeding the new things I was growing. I never replied. There was nothing left to say. These days, my biggest concerns are whether my basil needs more sunlight or if I'll ever master crow pose in yoga. There's no drama, no plotting, no pretending. And the peace I feel isn't performative, it's earned. It's quiet and complete. Some people wait for closure. I created mine. Some people wait for karma. I became mine. They thought I was weak. They thought I'd break. But they forgot one simple truth. You can't break a woman who's already rebuilt herself. Stronger, sharper, and entirely on her own terms.